From Stutter Success Stories is a series of interviews with people who reached freedom from stuttering or are on their way there. Freedom from stuttering. It's when stuttering is not holding you back in your life. It can be either achieving fluency, real progress on that path, or it can be reaching your goals and making a difference despite stuttering. So we're going to press for specifics. How are they doing that? What can we learn from them? And what can we apply in our life? Today we'll talk with Peter Louw, an author of the book Coping with Stuttering. You can find his videos on YouTube about passive airflow technique. He also created a Facebook group about stuttering as a mind-body disorder. I'm very curious about these two topics, so let's dive into it. Hello, Peter. Today we are having Peter Louw with us, and thank you for coming. And I have many questions. Hope that we'll cover most of them. First of all, I see you in the many Facebook groups about stuttering. You have a YouTube channel, Facebook pages. So I see you're very active and you're very into that. Can you say why?
Okay, stuttering was always a problem for me since I was about 3 or 4 years old. And especially at school, it really messed up my life. Also at university, and especially when starting a job or jobs and during my employment. So with this, obviously, it was frustrating, and fortunately, I did have some speech therapy when I was still a child, which didn't help much. When I was a student, I actually went to a psychologist because I was convinced that it was a mind thing. So that helped because he taught me to relax and to not get stressed, and that helped. But my big change came when I was in my 30s, in 1980, when I did a workshop with Dr. Martin Schwartz, who is an American. He was a professor in speech science at the time. He's retired now. And that workshop really helped me, and it inspired me to work on myself, to improve my speech, and in the process also try to help others, because by trying to help others, you also help yourself, because the more involved you get with stuttering self-help, the better it's for your own speech. So yeah, that's really why I started, and I've been involved with self-help groups for decades, and as a result, I mean, I've been doing this for about 30 years now, more. I'm in my 60s now, and really the longer I got involved, the better my speech became.
Yeah, that's a great idea that you said, that when you try to help others, that's the best, like maybe the best way to help yourself, because to teach others something, you need to really get it. Okay, and can you say just a couple of words about, like, when people say, what do you do? What do you say? Like, about you said it was, it affected stuttering affected you in your, like, jobs. how did it affected your, you think, your career choice or this part of
Oh,
your life?
it affected me terribly in the beginning, in the first 30 years of my life, because I'm a qualified lawyer, but
Wow.
yes, but I never could practice. You know, which was really my own fault. I should never have studied law. But I thought I thought that the the legal qualification would improve my own fluency. I had that funny idea, which is completely incorrect. But at the time, I thought that my legal qualification would improve my confidence. But when I finished my law degree, I found out that I couldn't even make a phone call, you know, things like that. So I didn't become a lawyer. I went into languages. I became a journalist and a translator and things like that, where speech is not that important.
Mm, got it. That's an interesting story, really, because
Yeah.
I also qualified as a lawyer, and but I didn't go to courts much, really, because I struggled. Didn't go to, you know, public authorities where you need to speak. I mostly worked in like corporate thing where you talk with your
Mm,
colleagues
mm,
mostly. Yeah.
okay.
Got it. Got it. That's a really interesting thing. And can we talk first about the airflow technique? Because when you describe your way through stuttering, you first say that you first discovered this airflow technique and it helped you. Um, I understand there are videos in YouTube, and I'll give the links to those, but can you like maybe describe in a couple of words how does it work?
Yeah, certainly. The airflow technique is based on a fantastic idea that stuttering is actually, well, not cause, but that the vocal cords um, the vocal cords are sensitive to tension and stress, and of course the vocal cords are here, um, and due to excess stress, too much tension, they tend to freeze or lock down. They, you know, the vocal cords are like this, you know, and
Okay.
they vibrate continuously. But for us, for some reason, when there's too much stress on the vocal cords, they tend to freeze. They kind of lock into fixed position and now that happens for a fraction of a second. It happens extremely fast, and then obviously again it gets freed again. It gets loose again, but it can freeze all the time, and that's actually what we call a block. And the block is really what results in what we call stuttering. The word repetitions or the all the funny things we do, repetitions and prolongations, and that is really our way of trying to deal with this block, this vocal cord block. So Dr. Schwartz, who developed the airflow technique, he taught me, or he taught us to let a very small slip of air come out of your lips just before speaking, because that apparently um, that relaxes the cords a bit and it opens them slightly, and then also you have to slow down the first syllables of the word, which also reduces the tension on the chords. So that's really the basics of the airflow technique. So you first let some air out of your lips, like I'm doing now. My name is Peter Louw. Or
Oh, got it.
that's,
So it's
yeah,
like because speaking is breathing air out, so we kind of start already breathing out, and then like our sounds go on top of that air that begins to get out, right?
yeah. But the airflow has to be very slight, because
Yeah.
if you push it, it's not
Yeah.
going to work. So you have to,
Okay.
yeah, you have to let it slip out. It's a very slight amount of air, and it can be picked up by a microphone. So when you learn it and when you practice it, you actually record that airflow. It makes a characteristic sound when that little bit of air hits the microphone. So it can be tested externally, the airflow.
Okay,
The,
but just to make it clear, if I understand it correctly, so airflow technique is when you start your speaking, like you start before you speak, you let some air go off you, like out, right?
yeah,
Okay.
it's like I'm doing now. At the moment, I'm talking with a bit of airflow
Mm.
before I speak. Can you notice it? I
Not really.
also,
Yeah,
I
because
will,
maybe you practice that a lot.
yeah,
Maybe at first, when you, because every technique at first needs to be, like broken down into pieces, and you go deep into that piece. After you practice, it kind of looks like more like a whole thing. Yeah, got it.
okay.
Mhm. And my question then about this airflow technique, again, in your experience, does it give you like a confidence that you can start any phrase, any word with this without speech impediments?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. Look, the airflow is not foolproof. It depends on your stress levels, for instance. So if you're highly stressed and you sit like this and you are very
Yeah,
uptight, then obviously it's also going to affect your vocal cords, and you probably won't be able to really apply the technique as it should be applied. So it's not foolproof. Um, if you, like I said, if you're in high stress, it's going to be difficult to
mm,
apply that. So, but it's wonderful for reading. If you want to read, it's fantastic. Since I've learned the airflow, I never stutter when I read, because when you read, you are more of in control.
yeah,
You can focus on what you're going to say. So there it works, and it works very well for me in day-to-day conversations with my wife and my family and friends. But it's if you want to use it in high stress situations, you first have to to gradually practice those particular situations. For instance, if you want to use it on the phone, you have to first start by in at a low level. First, use the airflow technique when you're not really speaking with somebody on the phone. For instance, you can have you kind of practice on the phone, and you
Got it.
use sentences, but you don't actually speak to the person. And then gradually you start this with, say, a friend of yours or a family member where you feel comfortable. And so
Mm-hmm.
you gradually work up to real live phone calls with an unfamiliar person. And that goes for speech making and all those difficult situations. You can't just jump into the deep water, as it were. You have to start in with baby steps.
Got it. And when you say when you're tense and when you're stressed, it's difficult. My question is this, because it seems to me like that, is this airflow technique also kind of relaxes you a bit? Because when you do it, it seems like you get a bit relaxed when you start this
Yeah.
thing.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
It has a relaxing effect. In fact, there is a requirement. Dr. Schwartz taught us that as you flow out, as you flow that air out of your mouth, you're actually supposed to relax in body and mind. So you have to, so that's something which you have to practice. You practice, and as you flow out, you relax your whole body like this, and
yeah.
you have to relax your mind too, because it's not going to work if you focus on that feared sound or feared word. You have to you have to empty your mind before you flow out. And gradually, by means of conditioning, by means of habit, you then learn to relax as you flow out.
Got
So
it.
that, yeah,
So, in other words, it helps, it really helps, but you wouldn't say that it gives like 100% confidence that I can say it without speech impediment. Or if you do it more slower, more like in a training mode, you know that you will say it 100%, just to make it clear. Because, I think that's my observation. I want to talk about it, that when we have that confidence, it kind of changes something. So I see that many, maybe not all, but many techniques anyway have that technique, or something that gives you that confidence. So what do you say? Does it, if you do it maybe more like if you do it slower, do you feel that you'll say it, you can say it without speech impediments 100%, or it's not like that?
no, look, I think any fluency technique has its limitations. It's not going to solve all your problems. I worked on the airflow technique for about for a few decades, but um, even so, there were still fears, fears of certain situations which I still had. It did help me enormously. But the one big limitation of a fluency technique is that it's hard work. You have to practice it.
Yeah.
First you have to learn it. Although the learning itself is the easiest part. It's not that difficult, but to practice it, it because it has to become a bit of a habit, and and that takes time. But also the psychological adjustment to that technique, to better fluency. That's also a big problem, and that caused me lots of problems. Now that's a whole different theme really, but I think one should mention that. I mentioned that in my book, which I wrote. I did write a book on stuttering. I actually have it here. I can show it to you, but it's anyway. But it's online anyway. It's freely online in my blog. But I mentioned that the first few months of my working with the airflow it was very exhilarating on the one hand, because I did get much more fluent, but psychologically I found it very difficult to adjust to better speech, and I had terrible relapses, you know. So, and I think that's one point which is not often mentioned. It's people tend to ignore that, but the psychological adjustment to fluency is a huge problem.
Yeah.
I've seen it often. You know, I've watched it often with people. They with fluency techniques. They begin well and they work hard, and then they do get better, and then suddenly they get huge relapses. Terrible. Oops, yeah, um, can you hear me still? Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There are, yeah, like I said, the psychological adjustment to fluency is being terribly underestimated.
Oh, sorry. Maybe I don't hear you that well as previously.
Okay, is that better? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. And
Oh,
now?
yeah, this is better.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Yeah, so yes, I had terrible relapses myself, where you know, the one day I was totally fluent, and the next day everything went wrong when I couldn't say a word, and that was really bad, you know. And the same happened with other guys who were in my workshop, and and many of them got discouraged, you know, because these relapses are really nasty things, and you feel that you're not making progress. And that's, you know, so that's the psychological part of it. And my personal feeling is that it's the subconscious which is reacting to your fluency.
Yeah, we're coming to the mind-body thing.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Just last question about airflow technique. So you said that there was a workshop. Is there like a place where people can go through some program?
And unfortunately, Dr. Schwartz has retired. For specifically for airflow, the only thing which I can recommend is that people watch those videos from Dr. Schwartz. He had a course. He made his a workshop which is now on my blog. You'll see there are 3 videos, and there's a manual and a workbook. That's about the best I can do, unfortunately.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a real pity that nobody has come to continue the work which he has been doing. That is a real shame. But there is Dr. Schwartz was a controversial figure, at the time. You know, he kind of was not really part of the speech pathology scene in the US. And most of his colleagues really did not approve of these ideas for many reasons. I mentioned some of them in my book. So that is a real pity that his work has not been continued. I think I'm one of the few people who we still trying to emphasize the idea of vocal cords, the vocal cord freezing, and that this is the basis of all stuttering.
Great. I'll give the links to your blog and the book for sure. Okay. Now we're coming to the mind-body thing, because you described that then you found this yeah, maybe you'd better describe it, because yeah, so you discovered that that mind-body principles that help you say. Can you tell a couple?
Yeah. Actually, I'm not the first to have come to that conclusion. I believe the first expert was Dr. Howard Schubiner. He is very well known within the mind-body scene. He is a medical practitioner, but he's also a mind-body practitioner who has a practice based on mind-body principles. And he wrote an article in 2011, I think it was, where he said that he believed that stuttering is a mind-body disorder. It was an article actually on that movie, The King's Speech, which he analyzed in terms of mind-body theory. But I actually came to mind-body thinking in a different way, which in a very personal way, and that was in 2012, which was at the time of my retirement, which is actually relevant. I'll tell you just now. One day I lifted my suitcase and I got a terrible lower back spasm, a terrible pain in my lower back. And okay, that's really a long story, so I won't bore you with that. But I went, you know, since then my back caused me terrible pains. I had all kinds of treatment, you know, X-rays and a scan, and eventually an injection in the hospital. And as I lay recovering from that injection, I did some reading on the internet about back pain. And I came across a book by Dr. John Sarner. I actually got it here. Here it is. Okay, yeah, that's the one. Healing back pain. It's a very well-known book. It's a bestseller, and I read that book, and it made enormous sense to me. And funnily enough, just by reading that book, my back pain started to lift, and it really hasn't caused me much problem since then. that's the time when I became interested in mind-body thinking. My back problems did not heal immediately. It took some time. I got some relapses also, and some, but eventually at the moment it's under control, and it's been under control for years now. Then last year I started to think, why maybe my stutter is a mind-body problem. And I thought, no, that can't be, because stuttering is a developmental thing, whereas most mind-body issues are pains. But then I did some more reading, and I found out that mind-body issues are not only pain. There are many things within the mind-body scene which are not, which do not involve pain. They can be skin disorders, they can be stomach disorders, migraines, headaches, spastic colons, things like that. So I also began to think, because in my life I've had many headaches, but I've also had spastic colons, I've had some skin problems. I began to think that actually most of my minor health problems, because I'm actually a very healthy guy, but most of my minor issues during my life were in fact tension related. That I knew. But I thought that maybe stuttering too is one of those things. So I began to think about that, and I first said, no, that is too far-fetched. It can't be a mind-body thing. But as I started to think more and more, I started to say to myself, why not? Why not? And that's where I am now. I'm fully convinced that stuttering is a mind-body disorder. It's a psychophysical thing. And the only thing is, it hits us when we are still very young, when we are 3 years of age, or 4 or 5 or 6, and most of us. It hits us, and it hits us because we repress our emotions as a child. Probably feelings of rage or fear or whatever, but we tend to repress our emotions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let me just inject, because I am looking at this from, again, a very consumer side, like a person who stutters. So what I see, like, the very simplified approach to this mind-body thing is like every problem comes from our mind, but mind usually is viewed like thinking machine. So I'll tell myself like an affirmation, like I don't stutter, but the next day I still stutter. So people think, oh no, that doesn't work. So as far as I understand, please correct me, that this mind-body thing is more about understanding your mind as like actually mind and body as some in a holistic way, or something like it's like one whole, and like mind not simply like a thinking machine, but more like our whole, like the soul, whatever. So it's bigger than just our thinking, and but then if that's the right perception, we get into something that we don't quite grasp, don't quite understand. So with that, because we always want to be very objective, like what should I do exactly? You say I read the book and something began to change, but and you say about some principles, right? So the question that comes, like what exactly should I do to kind of uh, start changing anything?
Okay. I think we should change the way we think about stuttering. That is a very big principle, because we tend to isolate stuttering as a body thing, and it's not a body thing. It's okay. It's partly body thing. It's a mind body thing. So, but that requires a different way of thinking about stuttering.
Okay. Um,
And right, and one more thing is, it's one thing to say that we have to change our thinking, but that means we also have to change our subconscious thinking, because the mind is only partly conscious. A very big part of our thinking happens subconsciously. That is a fact. That if, every psychologist will tell you that. So it's not enough to just think consciously in a different way. You gradually have to, these thoughts, this new way of thinking gradually has to sink into your subconscious too. And that's going to take time.
oh, got it. Yeah, that's a good answer. So I was asking you, like, you know, this from this physical objective world, like, what should I do? And when we say do, it's some, you know, technique or something we can, you know, see and touch and understand. And you say we need to approach it a bit differently. So we come back to this mind thing, right? So it's all about, again, so the action is not like the very physical action, it's more like rethinking stuttering. That's what you say.
Yeah, yeah. Look, yeah, that is basically it. But of course, it can go further too, because um, we've been stuttering for many decades, most of us, especially at my age. We've been stuttering for years, so there is still a lot of neural pathways in our brains. We have been conditioned to stutter to a large extent. So it's going to take some much thinking and also many changes in your way of thinking to get rid of all those neural pathways which have formed into your brain. And that's going to take some time also. So the conditioning is still going to, it's still there. Even in my mind, I mean, I'm quite fluent at the moment, but I know that the neural pathways are still dormant. Are still they are weak now, and they are getting weaker all the time. But they are still there, and you still have to be careful. But I think I'm myself making good progress. But I still know in certain circumstances I will still block and will still get tense and get stressed and have speaking problems. Yeah.
And I saw, you know, a list, like, again, in the group, I saw there are files, and there is an interesting file which says there is a link between our like negative things like anxiety, fear, envy, all those things, and our sicknesses, illnesses, etc. So, and I started questioning myself. So is it like I need to be a better person and then I'll have less, illnesses and sicknesses? And in terms of stuttering, what exactly, like, again, you say about principles, maybe can you share like some practical things? What exactly can be done to, and what do you do actually? What like principles do you use?
Yeah, frankly, I don't do much at the moment, because just getting my mind changed, and thinking differently about stuttering, that in itself helps me enormously. But what I do try to do in my daily life is, and that I find very helpful, is it's doing the opposite from what I did in the past. In the past, I tended to repress my feelings to some extent, unconsciously. But the opposite of repressing is expressing. So in my daily life, I try to be more expressive. I try to use my hands more. I try to do better body language. I whereas in the past I sat like a robot. I kind of sit and I blah blah
Right.
blah blah blah. And
Yeah.
which is very wrong. You have to express. Let your feelings come out. Let people see what you're feeling. That's the kind to get rid the way to get rid of stuttering.
Yeah.
And
And that's a
so
great thing. You mentioned that to express as one of the things. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about the acting thing? Because Bruce Willis, Emily Blunt, Ed Sheeran, people who perform, they say that they did have stutter, and they we should say they don't have it, or they're uh, so, and in my mind, it somehow goes together with this holistic view of this mind-body thing. Uh, so it's not just a speaking box, it's just not our whole body, but just our whole as, one, that it's not only our speaking box that produces, speaking, it's like something more. So what
absolutely,
is it
it's
about why? So how do they relate this mind body thing and this acting way? How people get through stuttering and come.
absolutely, it's absolutely. I fully agree. Um, the word is expressing. When you act, you express. When you sing, you express. You express your feelings. When you have good body language, you know, using your hands, using your head, using your eyes and your whole body to you express, and that's the opposite of a repressing. You don't repress your your thoughts, your speech. It's letting it out. It's letting it out. John Harrison, I don't know if you know him. He's an American. He's very well known in stuttering circles in the US, and his big principle is not holding back. Don't hold back, and that's what I'm saying. It's don't repress, express, express. Let it come out. you have to let it come out, and yeah, that is really what it's all about. Express.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Um, I also, in I read some of your principles, what can help. And one other thing I found is you say as a principle that kind of don't try to concentrate on stuttering, just ignore it. So, and that reminded me of about the acceptance, theory or practice when people get over and they just start stuttering more, and so they don't let stuttering stop them from doing things. So, what do you think about that as a way to improve speaking and get
Yeah, yeah. Look, yeah, that is the principle which comes from Dr. Sarno, the mind-body pioneer. According to him, mind-body symptoms are a defense mechanism, a psychological defense mechanism, and the way to remove the defense mechanism is to actually ignore it, to not not attend to it, to not give so much importance to it. Because for some reason, which I don't know myself, but uh, these defense mechanisms which are in your mind, they they get stronger when you attend to them, when you focus on them. When you ignore them, they get weaker. So that's why Dr. Sarno says that if you have back pains or any other pains or other mind-body symptoms, you should ignore them as much as possible, and actually even try to laugh at them, but don't give them any time. And that, for me, if I apply that principle to stuttering, it means don't worry too much when you do stutter. To
Mm-hmm.
hell with it, ignore it. It's not important, and the less importance you give to it, the weaker it should become. So that's all part of the way to gradually dismantle the defense mechanism of stuttering.
Yeah, agree totally. Okay, one more question I have, maybe probably the last one. Sometimes it seems that we don't move, we don't improve. Like we work on our speaking or like a more holistic view, and we do something, we tend, as you say, we have some improvements, then relapses. Do you think that it still makes sense to make progress, or how progress happens? What is your observation? Like, because people are often discouraged. I've done something and then relapse. So there is no point in improving efforts if they don't give you 100% effect. So
Yeah,
what do you say about it?
yeah. No, look, it's the old thing that it's two steps forward and one step backward. That happens all the time. It happened to me when I still worked with airflow. Exactly the same thing happened. I made progress and then one step back. But I just continued. I continued relentlessly with my practicing. And same now. At the moment, I'm in this new phase where I gradually dismantle my stuttering defense mechanism, and my speech even now gets better and better. But I also get my relapses, definitely. They are, fortunately, they are not as bad as they were 20 years ago. But I still have my days where I feel that I'm not as fluent as the previous day. So that is natural. It's normal because your subconscious will always try to get back to the status quo. Always, it will always fight back. It's not easy. You have to fight against it. And so there is this moving forward. You move forward, and your subconscious say, no, 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 no. We don't like change. Get back. And then you go forward again. You say, no, it's to hell with your subconscious. I'm in control. It's not the subconscious which is in control. I'm in control. So then you go forward again. And then the subconscious says, no, no, no. And so that is the normal way of that you do eventually get better.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, great. It was great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much. And I think it was really helpful. It was helpful to me because I'm trying to enlarge my understanding. And as you said, it's a pity that people who, you know, do something in this field, they oftentimes their ideas vanish. Even sometimes they do work, and then if there is no one who can pick it up and use it on, then so it's great that you shared that.
Yeah, I do hope that more people will be helped by this approach. Within my group, the stuttering as a mind-body disorder, it seems that some other people are also finding this beneficial. They just have to start doing that reading. They have to read those books, the mind-body books, because it's what Dr. Sana calls knowledge therapy. By increasing your knowledge about mind-body, you actually start changing your mind.
Got it. Okay, thank you so much. I'll sure give the links to all the resources that are available. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mind body. Yeah.
Okay.
And we'll keep in touch. Thank you so much.
Okay, Andre. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you got free from stuttering or improved your speaking, or just have something to share, let me know. Tell us about your experience. Become part of this project. So, do you think it's possible to overcome stuttering? Is it worth trying? Leave a comment. For more videos, subscribe to this YouTube channel, head over to freefromstutter.com blog, join Free From Stutter Facebook group, and I'll see you in the next video.